You know what's funny? Not ha ha funny. Not the kind that makes your stomach hurt from laughter, but that other kind of funny. The kind that feels like a knife twisting in your chest. It's the silence after you gave someone your everything, and all they did was blink. Like it meant nothing. Like you meant nothing. People say they want real, but when they get it, raw, broken, scarred, they throw it away like trash. You were real. You didn't wear a mask, didn't fake a smile when your soul was rotting. You showed up even when your knees were shaking, even when your heart was bleeding. And what did they do? They mocked you, played you, walked away like it was easy. And the worst part? You still blamed yourself. But listen, really listen, because I'm not here to sugarcoat. You think they left because you weren't good enough? No. They left because you were too much, too deep, too intense, too real. And that scared the hell out of them. See, people don't want the truth. They want comfort. They want easy. And you were a mirror. You showed them everything they were too cowardly to face in themselves. Your presence demanded honesty. And let's face it, most of them are allergic to that. You were loyal in a world built on betrayal. You stayed silent in a world addicted to noise. You gave without asking, loved without holding back, and they drained you like a leech on a vein. That's not your failure. That's your proof. Proof that you were never meant for average people. And now they're gonna paint you as cold, distant, changed. But they don't talk about the nights you cried alone. They don't talk about the storms you walked through just to bring them sunshine. They won't mention how you sacrificed your own peace just to keep theirs intact, because it makes them uncomfortable to admit they had something golden and let it slip through their fingers like dust. So they rewrite the story, make you the villain. Why? 'Cause it's easier than admitting they broke something that loved them right. But don't get it twisted. This pain, it's not your enemy. It's your forge. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every time they made you feel invisible, it's fuel. It's wood for the fire that's gonna turn you into something unshakable. You don't need closure from ghosts. You don't need validation from cowards. What you need is to wake up. Wake up to the fact that you were the blessing. You were the healing. You were the one that loved without limits in a world full of liars and users. You were the real one, and they just didn't see it. But one day, they will. They'll scroll through their lifeless feeds, stare at empty conversations, and feel that void, that silence you used to fill, that loyalty they'll never taste again. And it'll hit them like a freight train. They had everything and they threw it away for noise, for lust, for ego. But by then, it'll be too late. You'll be long gone. Not bitter, just better. Stronger, sharper, untouchable. 'Cause now you know you don't chase people who flinch at your depth. You don't water gardens in deserts. You don't bleed for hands that never reach back. Nah, Now you walk alone, and the ground trembles beneath you. They thought your silence meant weakness, that your calm was surrender, that your kindness was desperation. They thought wrong. See, what they never understood is that silence is where real power sleeps. When you stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped defending your value, that's when the shift happened. You stopped begging to be seen, and that shook them. People like them, they feed off attention, off your effort, off your light. And when you pulled it all back, when you became unavailable, they started to suffocate in the emptiness they created. You see, they were never in love with you. They were in love with the way you loved them. And when that love turned cold, when your back turned and your eyes stopped searching for them, they felt the burn of their own reflection. For the first time, they had to sit with the truth. They had someone rare, real, but they treated you like an option. And real ones don't stay where they're disrespected. You ever notice how loud it gets when you go quiet? That's because you were the one carrying the whole show. Every time things fell apart, you were the glue. When things got dark, you were the light. And still, they made you feel like you were the problem, like you were too sensitive, too emotional, too much. But let's be real. What they meant was too conscious. You noticed the lies. You felt the shifts. You saw the games. And you had the nerve to call it out without sugar. That made them uncomfortable. People like to lie to themselves. And when you refuse to join their illusion, they call you toxic. But no. You were just awake in a world that teaches people to sleepwalk through connections. You were the rare kind that feels everything, that pays attention, that remembers, that loves with full heart, even after being torn up, left on red, abandoned mid-sentence. And they took that and broke it like it was disposable. You want truth? Here's truth. Some people don't deserve closure. They don't deserve explanations. What they deserve is silence. And not because you're petty, but because you've evolved. You learned that peace is more valuable than forcing a bond, that your energy isn't free, that your love isn't a charity. You bled for people who wouldn't even hand you a tissue. You cried over ones who forgot your birthday but expected your presence at their every breakdown. And you gave? God. You gave like it was your purpose. But not anymore. Now you give to yourself. You give to your goals. You give to your grind. And when they come back, and they will, with that, I've been thinking about you lately. Nonsense. Just smile. Not out of spite, but out of wisdom. Because you now understand they weren't ready for you. And maybe they never will be. But don't hold your breath for that day. Don't wait for their apology or their regret or some magical realization that they lost something rare. Number. Let them rot in the silence. Let them sit in the mess they made. Because you're not the same anymore. You outgrew their chaos. You stopped needing their approval. You became your own rescue. And that's the most dangerous version of you. The one who doesn't need anyone to validate what you already know. That you were the real one. You were the one who stayed when it got hard, who cared when it was inconvenient, who loved when it wasn't returned. And they'll spend their whole life chasing cheap imitations of what you gave so freely. But here's the real pain. They'll never find it again. Because people like you, they don't come around twice. You were the once in a lifetime they weren't built to keep. And now, every love will feel like less. Every touch will feel empty. Every conversation will feel scripted. And your name, it'll echo in their head every time silence gets too loud. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did everything right. And the tragedy of it all. They had no clue they were living in the presence of something sacred. They thought you were replaceable. They thought if they walked away, they'd find better, shinier, louder. But what they didn't realize is that you weren't loud because you didn't need to be. Your presence didn't scream. It whispered truths their hearts weren't ready to hear. And now they're drowning in a sea of noise, searching for a voice that calmed storms the way yours did. They're chasing bodies that mimic your shape, but not your soul. Faces that smile like yours, but carry nothing behind the eyes. Hearts that beat, but don't burn. They'll go through 1,000 connections and still feel the hollowness you left behind. Not because you did something wrong, but because they did everything wrong when they had you. Let me tell you something about the kind of love you gave. It doesn't die. It leaves fingerprints. It haunts. You weren't just a chapter in their story. You were the plot twist, the turning point, the one they'll keep revisiting in their head when everything else starts falling apart. Because they'll remember how you spoke life into them when they didn't believe in themselves. They'll remember the way you noticed the little things, how you remembered the stuff they thought no one ever would. They'll remember how your energy made chaos feel like home. And when they're sitting next to someone who's there just for convenience, just to fill the void you left, they'll feel the difference. It won't be the same. It can't be the same. Because what you gave wasn't built in a day. It was stitched together from your pain, your patience, your passion, and they lost it. For what? For attention? For games? For ego? But don't let that bitterness in. Don't let their blindness become your burden. You've got a war to win, a kingdom to build, a peace to protect. Stop looking back at doors that slammed in your face. They were never your destination. They were just detours dressed like destiny. The real ones don't leave. They don't give up when it gets hard. They don't need to be begged to stay. And anyone who needed to lose you just to see your worth, they were never worthy of you to begin with. So cry if you must, Scream if it helps. But don't you dare shrink. Don't you dare let this pain turn you soft. Let it carve you. Let it sculpt you. Let it teach you the art of standing alone with your head high and your heart still full. Because there's power in the one who walks away without making a scene. There's power in silence, in solitude, in not needing to prove a damn thing. You were always enough, more than enough. You were just in the wrong hands. They didn't deserve the version of you that loved without fear. But you deserve to meet the version of yourself that rises from the ashes. The version that stops explaining, that stops chasing, that starts building without looking over the shoulder, that becomes so focused on evolving that even memories lose their grip. Because the truth is brutal, but simple. You were the real one, and they just didn't see it, but you do now. And that's all that matters. And that realization, it's going to hurt. Not just once, not just for a week, but in waves. Quiet waves that hit you when everything seems calm. You'll be walking down the street, earphones in, the world busy around you, and boom, a memory, a voice, a moment. You'll remember the way you waited for their messages, how you stared at your screen hoping for a name to pop up, how you made excuses for their silence, lied to yourself, just to keep them painted in gold. That's the ugly part of having a pure heart. You keep giving light to people who only know how to live in the dark. And every time you gave a piece of yourself, they took it like it was owed to them. Like you didn't have wounds, too. Like your soul wasn't bleeding under the weight of all their emotional absence. But here's where the shift begins. You stop asking why. You stop analyzing. You stop trying to find meaning in the wreckage. Because sometimes there is no meaning. Some people destroy beautiful things just to prove they can. Some people will rip out your roots and then blame you for not blooming. They didn't hurt you because you were weak. They hurt you because they were. Because your strength made them feel small. Your presence made them uncomfortable in their skin. Your loyalty put pressure on their laziness. You made them look in the mirror and they couldn't stand what they saw. So they turned on you like cowards do. And now they call you too much. But in reality, you were too real for people who've been faking it their whole lives. It's funny, isn't it? How they always come back when it's too late. How they suddenly realize your worth after they've already done the damage. But you're not the same anymore. You've tasted the silence. You felt the cold. And somehow, you didn't break. You sharpened. You grew teeth, a spine, a sense of self that doesn't beg anymore. You're no longer handing out explanations like apologies. You're no longer sitting in places where your voice is drowned out. You finally understand. Your love is a gift, not a currency. Your time is an offering, not a debt. And your presence is not some background noise. noise. They only noticed its value after it went quiet. After you disappeared from their stage and the whole show lost its soul. You see, real ones don't get applause while they're present. They get rewrites in silence. They get whispers behind closed doors. I should have treated them better. They were the only one who actually cared. But those whispers won't reach you anymore. You're walking in rooms now where your silence speaks louder than their screams. You're building a life so loud in purpose, so full in passion, that even your absence echoes louder than their best efforts. That's the irony. They left thinking they'd feel free, and now they're the ones chained to memories they'll never escape. That laugh, that patience, that unshakable energy. They'll see it in flashes, on strangers' faces, in late-night regrets, in songs they used to skip. You'll haunt them in ways you'll never even know. But you keep walking, keep rising, keep mastering the art of being unbothered and undeniable. Because once upon a time, they had the rarest thing a person could ask for, you. And now they just have the silence and the weight of what they lost. And don't get it twisted. They'll pretend they're fine. They'll wear that fake smile, post those highlight reels, laugh a little too loud at things that aren't even funny. But when the lights go off and the room gets quiet, your ghost will crawl in. Not the spooky horror kind. No. The kind that sits beside them in silence and reminds them of what real felt like, of what warmth felt like when it wasn't transactional, of what it meant to be seen, really seen, by someone who didn't want anything in return but honesty and effort. They'll remember the way you used to check in just because, the way your eyes softened when you cared, the way your energy could shift the whole atmosphere in a room without saying a single word. And it'll hurt. Not the kind of hurt that fades after a nap or a distraction. The kind that lingers, that digs into the chest and builds a home there. That's the curse of being unforgettable in a world addicted to temporary. You can't be replaced. They'll try. Trust me. They'll go from hand to hand, bed to bed, soul to soul, trying to find someone that makes them feel even half of what you did. And every time, they'll be disappointed, because no one will speak to their soul the way you did. No one will look past the surface and read their pain in silence. No one will challenge them to grow and still hold them when they fall. That was your magic. And they threw it away like a cigarette butt on the sidewalk, thinking they could light up again whenever they wanted. But that light, that warmth, that was you. And you're no longer available for people who show up only when it's convenient. So don't envy their smiles. Don't question your worth when you see them move on like nothing happened. Let them have their shallow comfort, their plastic connections. Because at the end of the day, they know what they lost. And what they gained in return it won't even come close. You, on the other hand, you're not just healing, you're evolving. Every scar now holds a lesson. Every tear has built a wall, not to keep people out, but to protect the kingdom you're building inside. The real ones? They'll earn their way in. No more passes for people who only loved the light, but fled at the first sign of your shadows. Because that's where your truth lives. In the shadows. In the parts of you that survived what tried to break you. And you're not hiding those parts anymore. You're owning them. You're wearing them like armor. This world doesn't need more fake smiles and sugar-coated lies. It needs more people like you. People who walk with quiet pain and loud purpose. Who give without agenda. Who love with depth. Who choose silence. Not because they're afraid, but because they're done explaining. You're not here to beg anymore. You're not here to prove yourself to people who were blind when you were right in front of them. You were the real one. You always were. And now, you're becoming something even greater. The untouchable one. The one they can talk about, but never reach. The one who loved hard and walked away harder. The one who didn't fold under pressure, but sharpened like. A blade in fire. That's who you are now. And no one's ever ready for that. And what they'll never admit out loud, what they'll choke on when they try to say your name, is that they miss the peace you brought. Not just the comfort, not the late night talks, or the way you listened like their words mattered, but that deep, grounding peace that came with your presence. You didn't just love them, you understood them. You held space for their chaos while silencing your own storms. You sacrificed your own emotional stability just to keep theirs steady. And they thought that was normal. They thought they deserved it. They thought that kind of love was common. So they grew entitled to your effort, thought they could come and go like your heart was a revolving door. But now that peace is gone, and what they have left is noise, just noise. People who want them, but don't know them. People who show up for fun, not for healing. People who take and take and take, and still leave them feeling empty. See, when you love like you did, you don't just leave footprints, you leave echoes. You haunt people with the absence of everything you were. They'll lie in bed next to someone new, hear a laugh that's almost like yours. See, a gesture that vaguely resembles your kindness, and for a second, just a second, they'll flinch because their mind will wander back to you, to the one who didn't just give love but gave depth. You didn't just touch their body, you touched the wounds no one else noticed. You sat with their silence, held their broken pieces like they were sacred, and they gave it up. For what? A thrill? A distraction? A fantasy? They thought they were trading you for something more exciting, but they were just running from their own reflection, because you were the only one who saw them, really saw them. And instead of healing with you, they chose to hide behind shallowness. But let them go on pretending. Let them keep chasing connections that are all flash and no fire, while you rise slowly, silently, ruthlessly, not out of revenge, not out of spite, but because your pain is finally being put to work. Every scar is now a blueprint. Every tear has become a foundation, and you're building a life that no betrayal can touch. You're no longer trying to be understood. You're busy becoming undeniable. You're not explaining why you're distant, why you changed, why you stopped reaching out. You're not leaving breadcrumbs for people who lost their way to you. You've boarded up the door they slammed shut and turned the key from the inside. Let them knock. Let them scream. Let them tell everyone you turned cold, because they'll never tell them what made you that way. That's the part they'll skip. They'll leave out how they neglected you, how they made you question your worth, how they fed you silence when all you ever served was love. They'll forget to mention the manipulation, the gaslighting, the emotional abandonment. But that's okay, because you don't owe anyone your side of the story. Your life now is the story. Your silence is the loudest chapter. Your success, your peace, your growth, they speak louder than any words you could ever scream. You were the real one. They just didn't see it, but the world will. Eventually. And when it does, you'll be too far ahead for them to ever catch up. And by the time they realize what they've lost, you'll have already become someone they can't even approach anymore. Not because you're bitter, but because you've outgrown everything they represent. You'll be standing in a life you built from rock bottom, with hands that once trembled from heartbreak, now building empires in silence. And they'll be watching. Oh, they'll be watching, pretending not to care while stalking your progress like it's their only source of purpose. Because nothing eats at a person more than seeing the one they broke become untouchable. You won't even need to say a word. Your calm will scream louder than their regrets. Your presence, even in your absence, will be heavy on their chest, because they'll see you in every reflection of what they could have had, every version of what they could have grown into if they weren't so terrified of someone who saw them too clearly. And when people ask them about you, they'll dodge the truth. Say things like, "We just grew apart," or "It wasn't the right time." But deep down, they'll know it was their cowardice, their laziness, their inability to hold something real when it was handed to them on a silver plate. Wounded, yes, but whole in intention. And they'll replay the moments they pushed you away, the texts they left unanswered, the calls they declined, the tears you wiped away by yourself when they vanished without explanation. And they'll realize they weren't just losing you. They were losing the only person who truly gave a damn. The only one who showed up every time, even when you were broken, tired, and empty yourself. But what they didn't understand is that real love, your kind of love, doesn't beg. It endures. It fights. It sacrifices. But once it's done, it's done. Because you finally learned that loving someone harder doesn't make them stay. That proving yourself to people who are blind by choice is like screaming in a vacuum. So you stopped. You shut the door. Not with drama, not with revenge, but with that cold, clean silence that only comes from understanding your worth. You finally looked in the mirror and saw what they couldn't. The warrior behind the pain, the strength beneath the scars, the fire that refused to die even when the world poured water over your soul. And that's where everything changed. You stopped chasing people and started chasing your purpose. You stopped explaining your silence and started protecting your peace. And in doing that, you became dangerous. Not because you're cruel, but because you're no longer desperate. You no longer look for home in the hearts of people who only offered you temporary shelter. You became your own safe place, your own sanctuary, your own revenge. And nothing terrifies them more than knowing that the one they left crying is now the one walking away, smiling. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because it no longer controls you. You were the real one, and now you're the rare one, the one they'll never replace, the one they'll never recover from. They thought you'd stay broken, that you'd sit in that corner forever, replaying the last thing they said to you, wondering what you did wrong. They expected you to chase, to beg, to drown in your own loyalty, because that's what they were used to. People who crumble under pressure, people who sell their dignity just to feel wanted for 5 more minutes. But you didn't. You burned, quietly, alone, but you didn't die in that fire. You let it shape you. You let it burn away the weakness, the neediness, the illusions. You let it reveal the bones of who you really are. Resilient, cold, clean. Now when they see you, there's a different kind of silence. Not the silence of abandonment. The silence of someone who has nothing left to prove. You don't speak because your energy speaks for you. You don't explain because your absence already explained enough. You left quietly, and it was the loudest thing you ever did. And you know what's ironic? They always thought they had time. Time to mistreat you. Time to take you for granted. Time to disappear and reappear like your love was a faucet they could turn on and off. But now that time's up, and they're realizing it in the worst way. Through silence. Not a dramatic goodbye. Not a final confrontation. Just silence. And that silence, it's choking them, because now it's filled with questions they can't answer, regrets they can't undo, words they wish they'd said, apologies they never gave, and it's too late, because you stopped waiting, you stopped hoping, you stopped needing anyone to validate what you already knew deep down. You were the one who gave real love, real loyalty, real effort. And they chose chaos over clarity, noise over truth, games over growth. Let them sit in it. Let them rot in their own confusion. You've got no business looking back at people who didn't recognize your worth while it was standing right in front of them. You're not angry. You're done. You're not cold. You're selective. You're not bitter. You're aware. Aware of how many times you overextended yourself. Aware of how much it cost you to love someone who never planned to give anything back. And now that you're finally pouring into yourself, now that you've stopped bleeding for people who wouldn't even flinch for you, now you're dangerous. Because nothing is more terrifying to those who took advantage of your heart than the day you decide to keep it for yourself. And you're not looking for revenge. You don't need it, because your peace, your growth, your silence, that's the revenge. While they recycle the same patterns, chase the same empty highs, lie to themselves in circles, you're rising. Every day you wake up and choose yourself, you're proving that they didn't destroy you. They just redirected you. And you're walking a path now where they can't follow. Not because they're not allowed, but because they're not built for it. They wanted to break you. Instead, they watched you become someone they can't even reach. You were the real one. And now you're the ghost that haunts every fake connection they try to force, just to forget your name. And when the world finally gets quiet around them, when the thrill wears off, when the distractions fade, when the people they ran to don't understand the shadows they carry, that's when your memory hits the hardest. It's not the big moments they'll remember, not the gifts, not even the fights. It's the little things. The way you said their name like it mattered. The way your energy softened their rage. The way your silence held more honesty than their words ever did. They'll feel it in empty rooms, in forced laughter, in shallow conversations that go nowhere, and it'll cut deep. Because they'll realize they had something irreplaceable. Something that didn't just touch the surface, but saw their soul. And they ran from it, lied to it, took it for granted like it was always going to be there. But nothing real stays where it's not respected. Not forever. You see, you were the mirror they avoided. You reflected every flaw they refused to face. Every crack they tried to hide with fake confidence and loud voices. And instead of healing with you, they chose people who made them feel less exposed. People who didn't challenge them to grow. People who were easier to fool. But now they miss the truth. They miss the realness. Because real has weight. Real has presence. And you were that presence. Now, their world feels hollow, no matter how crowded it gets. They can change their environment, their clothes, their company, but they can't replace the depth you brought. They'll touch others and still feel alone, because it wasn't your body they miss. It was your essence, that unshakable calm, that fierce loyalty, that ability to sit in the darkest parts of them without flinching. But you're not their lesson anymore. You're not their safe place. You've become your own. You stopped bleeding for people who didn't even notice you were cut. You stopped praying for peace in places that only ever gave you pain. And now, you're healing in ways they never imagined. Quietly, powerfully, without the need to prove anything to anyone. They don't get to see this version of you, the one that doesn't chase, doesn't explain, doesn't beg, the one who moves in silence, who builds in the shadows, who walks like a storm in disguise. You're not heartless. You're just heavily guarded because you finally realized your heart is rare. And rare things aren't left out for just anyone to touch. They'll call you cold now, detached, not the same. But that's just guilt talking. That's what people say when they no longer have access to the parts of you they abused. Let them talk. Let them wonder. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them softness. You don't owe them the version of you they destroyed. You were the real one. And now, you're the one that got away. The one they'll never stop remembering. The one who became everything they couldn't handle. Not because you changed, but because you grew past the places they stayed stuck in. And as the years pass, because they will, and time has no mercy, they'll carry your absence like a shadow. Quiet, constant, heavy. They'll try to fill the void with noise. More faces, more nights out, more meaningless attention from people who only want what's easy. But none of it will stick. None of it will hold. Because deep down, they know they had substance and replaced it with surface. They'll remember how your love didn't need to shout to be felt. How your loyalty wasn't conditional. How you gave even when you had nothing left to give. And they'll wonder, late at night, behind the mask they wear for the world, if they ever deserved you to begin with. The truth? Maybe they didn't. Maybe they were just a stop on your path, a storm that taught you how to anchor, a fire that burned away the parts of you that still needed validation. Because now, you're something else entirely. You're no longer the person who waits, who pleads, who lowers their worth just to be kept. You've seen what happens when you give yourself to the wrong hands, and you've learned. You've learned that silence can be louder than screaming. That distance is sometimes the clearest form of self-love. That walking away doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. And that's why you're dangerous now. Not because you're cruel, but because you've become untouchable in all the ways that matter. You know your worth so deeply, so painfully, that no one can manipulate you again. You're not available for confusion, for inconsistency, for crumbs disguised as care. You demand clarity, presence, truth. And if someone can't bring that to the table, you'll walk quietly, powerfully, with no need for closure. That's the part they'll never understand. They thought your silence was weakness, when really it was strength. They thought your absence was temporary, when really it was your final act of love to yourself. Because you didn't leave with anger, you didn't retaliate, you didn't try to hurt them the way they hurt you, you just disappeared. And that kind of disappearance, it haunts, it lingers, because it's not noise they miss, it's peace. And peace doesn't come from people who play games. Peace doesn't live in the hearts of those who confuse love with control. Peace was you. You were the calm, the depth, the honesty, the reality check they never saw coming. And when they tried to return to the shallow waters they were used to, they drowned in their own emptiness. So walk tall now, not in arrogance, but in awareness. You know who you are. You know what you've survived. You've loved with everything inside you and walked away with dignity. You don't need to be loud about it. You don't need applause or acknowledgement. Your peace is the proof. Your silence is the anthem. You were the real one. You were always the real one. And now you live like it, fully, quietly, unapologetically. Let them wonder. Let them finally understand that real isn't something you find every day. Real is rare. Real is costly. Real doesn't beg. Real walks away when it's no longer valued. And you, my friend, are as real as it gets.